ತ್ಯಾಗರಾಜ ಭಾಗದೆ ನಿನ್ನು ಕಮುಗನ ನೀರಜ ನಯನ ರಾಮ ನಿನ್ನು ವೇನ
Good evening. The passing of Seshadri is the end of an era for Indian mathematics. During the next hour and a half, a number of his close family, friends, and collaborators in mathematics and music share their memories of this remarkable man. Among them is Narasimhan, his most senior collaborator, who shares the story of their coming of age as mathematicians. Mumford tells of the deep shared mathematical concerns. The families were also very close. Some tell of friendships built on a passion for music. Others speak of the experience of working with Seshadri to help develop mathematics in India and of the building of the Chennai Mathematical Institute. And of course, Seshadri's family speak with great affection of the family man. Those who knew Seshadri well remarked on his equanimity, high ideals, and clear focus on the matter at hand while building for the future. This is an example for all of us to follow. Thank you.
With Seshadri for more than 7 decades, starting from 1948 to 1953, when we were students in Naila College. And then we joined Tata Institute in 1953, and that's when our close friendship started. During our student days, that is what they used to be called research student days, we worked very closely, very hard, reading a considerable amount of mathematics, perhaps in an eclectic way, but all this served later when we started working. So that is how sort of our friendship started. Then we went to Paris for 3 years, 1957 to 1960. Although in Paris we were working in completely different fields, we used to keep in touch with what we're doing and we're discussing regularly mathematics. Now, also it so happened that maybe even unconsciously, we were absorbing certain areas of mathematics in Paris, which in retrospect turned out to be very useful in our future work. So that is, and also, of course, I should say, since we're in Paris, we were exposed to the French culture, which we absorbed, and also good things of, French life. And also, it's important, I'll tell you why, we also acquired fluency in French. And this was very useful later when, Grothendieck started writing. Almost all the algebraic geometry was written in French for many years. Because, you have to be able to read easily, not that somebody tells you read this paragraph and then you take a dictionary and so on. And this was something very useful. These are all not expected, but then this came out as a kind of fallout of our stay in Paris. And then we came back to India, 1960, I think. And then we started working and did some work which connected differential geometry and algebraic geometry, of which I think both of us were very proud. Although I didn't collaborating with him later in a formal way, I used to talk to him quite a bit, mathematics, and I profited by his scholarship in algebraic geometry, and he shared his insights, completely I mean, without hiding anything. And I mean, that was very useful, although I was doing different kind of algebraic geometry, and that was very useful. So, and there's one more thing I want to say, which many people will not know. Probably they know about, certainly they know about our relationship in mathematics. I should say, I was introduced to Carnatic music by Seshadri. So my appreciation started with him, because when I was young, I was not exposed to any classical music, only film music, probably a bit of classical kind. So no idea of classical music. But then when we were in Bombay, every month there used to be a Carnatic music concert in Matunga, which is quite far from where we were living in Colaba. And Seshadri, of course, being interested in music, used to go there every month or maybe every once in 2 weeks. So I used to go with him, just like that. And then some of the greatest Carnatic musicians were performing there. So I used to sit there for 3 hours listening, to start with probably not appreciating very much. And afterwards, I could really get some feeling for what Carnatic music is about. Now I can really enjoy Carnatic music. I mean, it's completely thanks to history. Of course, we never discuss any technical aspects because I'm not familiar with this. But sometimes we used to discuss certain general things, like, for example, if a particular kriti is sung in a particular way now, does it really come from the composer, or how much was the input of later performers and so on? I mean, such general terms, but nothing very technical, because I'm not, certainly, competent to say that. Okay, I should also say it was not only mathematics we were always engaging. We also used to enjoy good things of life. I still remember just a few years ago, Seshadri was recalling fondly how much we enjoyed a beautiful sunset in the Adriatic coast, sipping high-quality port. So this kind of thing we used to like, sort of good food or good drink and so on. And it, of course, during this, sipping port, we also discussed mathematics and also many other things. So in any case, it's very hard for me to believe the reality that Seshadri is no more. I still feel I'm just in touch with him, because especially in the last few months, we were only talking on the phone, we didn't even see each other. So
Seshadri was one of my closest friends. I'm only a little bit younger than he was, and in the few years left remaining to me, I am going to miss him and his wife Sundari more than I can tell. Our relationship started in the mid-60s, when out of the blue I got this letter, somewhat like Hardy and Ramanujan, coming from what was at that time still a distant, faraway, exotic place, India. What followed after that was that we exchanged visits. He came to Harvard. I went to Bombay, as it was called then. In our case, Seshadri was the sophisticate, having been in Paris and knowing the ways of the West, while for me, India was a sensory explosion. The sights and sounds of Bombay were breathtaking. Our mathematics was pure joy. We worked in that Xanadu, sitting on the Indian Ocean, the Tata Institute, in the exploding area of moduli. It was a beautiful time, and what was really remarkable, his work overlapped with mine, my work overlapped with his, but what he really did in the end was to show that this rather cumbersome technique of stability of mine was not necessary. He said, you look at an ampleness criterion on the algebraic space, and anyway, it was magical discoveries of his which have been pursued since then and have really made this whole area come alive. But this is only one side of our relationship. It was our two families. We visited India with our family multiple times, and he came to Cambridge multiple times. And our families became really close, especially in 1972 when my wife and I thought that we really wanted a daughter to complete our family of 3 boys. And so we were able to adopt an Indian girl, and at that time, Seshadri and Sundari used to visit her regularly, and they became her grandparents. So now we have Suchitra connecting us so closely to India. In fact, it wasn't just that, but afterwards, as my kids grew older, they visited frequently, and the Seshadris opened their apartment, squeezed my kids in if they were visiting. We were really part of their extended family, like cousins, it seemed. But I really need to touch on his most astonishing and exciting endeavor, the formation of the Chennai Mathematical Institute. How was it that a gentle, intellectual, math and music-loving Tamil Brahmin should get involved in this highly difficult project of creating an entire college out of nothing? It was a remarkable combination of the Guru Shishya tradition of India and liberal arts traditions in America. How he did it, losing sleep so many nights over financial issues, flying to Delhi, pulling all the strings in his the connections that he had with people in Delhi, with businessmen that he connected to in Chennai. But against all odds, he's created this wonderful place. I want to finish by saying, God bless all of you who are making Seshadri's dream continue and flourish. I feel honored that I have known such a wonderful man all these many years. Thank you.
Seshadri was my mentor and teacher for well over 3 decades. I joined him as a doctoral student towards the end of 1984. As a teacher, he was very distinctive, somewhat indulgent to start with, but pressure and demand to keep pace with him increased with rapidity. He set very high standards for himself and hence on anyone whom he considered proximate. This highest standard of sustained creativity is what he often told me were the lasting values that he wished and hoped CMI will hold dear in its evolution. I am indebted to him for being my master in mathematics. He had strange modes of communication, of conveying what he felt were the core issues, but he always managed to get it across, and I became richer after every such transaction. He had the uncanny instinct for the key idea, and he had perfected a unique non-canonical approach to get to it. At the same time, he would be thrilled when he saw a new insight which he had missed and showed his appreciation very openly. There was a complete awareness of his own stature while being modest and humble at the same time. My discussions with him in person and over the phone, which often went on till very late in the evening, were a mix of light and groping in the dark, but invariably led to new heights in understanding. His passion and appetite for mathematics were insatiable. In the past couple of years, he was keen to return to periodic uniformization, Mumford curves, and an old paper of altics. My last discussion with him was on the 15th July, when I lectured to him for an hour. His keenness was intact, and it was discussion as usual, his failing health notwithstanding. He expressed joy on a new perspective on one of his old passions, bundles of nodal curves, and said, "Ah, I miss this. So simple, no?" I said we will continue the next day, and he most uncharacteristically responded with a laugh and said, "Can't give a guarantee for that." I close with a few words on his fundamental contributions that secure a permanent place for him amongst the leaders of 20th century geometers. Apart from the famous Narasimhan-Seshadri theorem, of which he was justly proud, and standard monomial theory, his deepest contribution lies in the construction of modelized spaces, where with profound insight and foreknowledge, he envisioned quotient spaces beyond geometric invariant theory. I really miss his presence.
It's a great honor to be talking about Professor Seshadri. I've spent a good amount of time with him over the last 8 years. An unbelievable person, a person whose devotion and dedication to mathematical sciences and his dedication to creating students who are excellent and they demonstrate pursuit of mathematical excellence is uncanny. The only thing that Professor Seshadri probably knows is maths, mathematical sciences, students, teaching, research. That's about it. He was so dedicated to the cause that he could blind himself to everything else in the world except mathematics. And I guess that's the type of skill, that's the type of devotion, effort, and time that is required to create a world-class institution like the Chennai Mathematical Institute, which has created some fantastic people, which has contributed to the cause of mathematical sciences, and which has been built through the sweat and blood of Professor Seshadri. His only relaxation outside of mathematics would be listening to good music. In fact, celebrations in CMI, whenever it is celebrated, is through a music concert by leading vocalists or instrumentalists. That was the type of culture that he wanted the students to grow in. That's the type of culture that he wanted in CMI, and that's the culture of mathematics that he built in CMI. You've got a generation of teachers and researchers created by him who are as simple as Professor Seshadri, as dedicated and committed to the cause as was Professor Seshadri, and who want to continue to build this institution on a sustainable basis based on Seshadri's legacy. Professor Seshadri was anxious during the last 3 or 4 years about sustaining and getting sufficient finances for CMI because the support that it was receiving from government institutions started reducing. He really wanted to build a corpus that could be used for sustaining and growing the institution. The only disappointment for people like us is that we couldn't create a large enough corpus during his lifetime. But we are committed to creating a big corpus for the institution from now on. And he took particular liking to specific people. He would instantly fall in love with certain people and keep inquiring about them. Srinivasan of Reddington was one such person. I just met and he said, "Every time you meet him, I would like to be there," is what he said. Such is the man's affection and such is the man's simplicity. It's a great honor that he has left behind this institution. May God bless Professor Seshadri. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce myself. I am Giridhar, the second son of C.A. Seshadri. I would just like to say a few things about my dad. I enjoy a lot about his music, his rags and rendering of his kritis, and enjoy a lot about his music. And I was with him whenever he used to practice varieties of kritis and rendering of rags and all that. It sounded very beautiful with a lot of melody and all that. And the music was the part which I really enjoyed the most. And as a person, he's always a very good dad. He and my mom were of great support to me and to the entire family. And it's basically a big loss to all of us, and we miss them a lot, and it's extremely difficult even to accept that they are not there. So my life goes on, and thanks.
Hello, this is Narsi, Professor Seshadri's eldest son. I'm very grateful to Professor Karandikar and Sripathy for giving me this opportunity to say a few words about my father. When I think of my father now, what comes to mind were his approachability, his simplicity, and his humility. And I believe this was because he was at peace with himself. And also, I think he possessed a tremendous amount of self-confidence. And I think this allowed him to forge deep and excellent relationships with people from all walks of life. And I strongly believe that this helped him tremendously in his institutional building. He was also deeply philosophical, but in a very practical way. And I believe that this gave him the ability to see how people and situations would evolve, as well as a resilience to overcome difficult situations and also to make the best of difficult situations. We moved to Chennai from the US and Mumbai in 1984. Subsequently, it turned out to be a very difficult time for my father, both professionally as well as personally. He could have left, could have gone abroad, as would have been the normal course for most, but he chose to stay and to fight it out successfully. Finally, for me, that he was willing to, in his late 50s, to change course from an academic to literally an entrepreneur and a leader who successfully established CMI later, was truly remarkable, inspiring, and motivating. I've been really blessed to have him as my father. Thank you.
I really was terribly shocked to hear that Seshadri is no more. And in fact, death is nothing new to me, the notion of death. Many people, in fact, most of my relatives are seeing deaths, but this death of Seshadri has affected me quite a bit. And in fact, I don't know why I should feel so bad about the whole thing, but however, it is because perhaps the closest friend that I had here, and to think that he is no more makes me really sad. I don't know where to turn for solace. Anyway, he is no more, and one has to accept this very hard fact. I thought I'll take this opportunity to say perhaps two different things about in which Seshadri, things in which Seshadri's name comes. The first one is essentially the last time when he and I were together in the institute. In fact, I was invited by Usha Madhavan, who teaches the undergraduates English. She has asked me. She asked me many times to lecture to the graduate students, undergraduate students, and I have done that. And the last lecture the last one that I gave was on Pico della Mirandola, and in fact I was not feeling too well on that day. Of course, I didn't want to cancel the lecture. Anyway, I thought I would go, and I went inside the lecture room, and curiously enough, there are only 3 people in the audience. One was, of course, Usha herself, the other was Seshadri, and the third one was a student from outside the institute who was visiting the place. There were only 3 people there. Anyway, I lectured on Pico della Mirandola, and in fact, Seshadri, as usual, asked many very pertinent questions, and we had nice discussions. Then after the lecture, we came out and we were walking towards our offices, when Usha took many shots with her camera, and I think these were the last shots that I and Seshadri will be together. So it gives me a terrible feeling that I am not going to be seeing him again. The second thing that I want to talk about is about Seshadri. You see, I was looking at the 80th birthday celebrations recorded by Sudhir in the journal published by Aravinda, and in fact he had a very long talk. Sudhir had a very long talk with Seshadri about me, and Seshadri, as usual, was very, very kind to say many nice things about me. And I want to say a few things about what he said in general. He says, the primary task, the primary leitmotif of a university is scholarship. And in fact, Sridharan, when he came here, told me exactly this. And he said this is due to Jacques Bosson. And he was repeating it, and he said that in fact, this implies that primary task being scholarship includes both research and teaching, and in fact is a much richer concept than just research or teaching. It's a composite thing, and in fact I was very happy that Seshadri took me seriously, and apparently he had read quite a bit about this, about the Jacques Bosson. And in fact I read this thing in a book of Chevalet with an introduction prefaced by, the preface which Jacques Bosson writes, and Jacques Bosson was the dean of the faculties at Columbia, and they were celebrating the 200th birthday of the Columbia University, and Chevalet published a book on spinors and Clifford algebras and so on. And in that book, as a preface, Jacques Bosson makes this remark, and in fact I was very impressed by the remark, and I mentioned this to Seshadri. Seshadri, of course, must have been very impressed by this, and he did something on his own, and he looked at the works of Jacques Bosson, and he came and he has mentioned in this the 80th birthday note which he wrote in the article
prepared by Sudhir. A long thing, and he gives me a great compliment. He says, I really have been of great, I really am I have stick to my high standards, and in fact I have done a great job in this institute. And I feel really very small when I hear Seshadri, when I read such a thing, because Seshadri has been too generous and so nice about me. And I only can say how small I feel on this occasion.
Joined TAFR in August 1960. Seshadri was still in Paris, but there was a lot of excitement about his then recent work in Paris, namely the affirmative answer to Sayre's conjecture on polynomial rings in two variables. The year 1960 marks at least three distinct major mathematical achievements: Seshadri on Sayre's conjecture, M.S. Narasimhan on elliptic partial differential equations, and Raghav Narasimhan on embedding of Riemann surfaces. As a beginning student, I could understand best what Seshadri's theorem meant, not the other two. There was naturally a great deal of excitement when Seshadri returned in early 1961. My own mathematical interest had not crystallized, but I was clear in my mind that I would not specialize in algebra, and so in the early years I did not have much contact with Seshadri. After the return from Paris, he started a seminar titled Schemes of Grothendieck, where he lectured on the new developments in algebraic geometry. So people at TAFR had an early exposure to revolutionary changes in the area. The seminar shaped the great future of several mathematicians, among them C.P. Ramanujan and Pauman Murthy. I was fairly close to Ramanujan and Pauman, and so would get to hear some interesting stories about Seshadri now and then. But it is somewhat later that I got to know Seshadri well. I think it is sometime in 1964 that my acquaintance with Seshadri became friendship. In those early years, already I was a frequent guest at his house. Seshadri and Sundari were great hosts, and their hospitality was, of course, enhanced by Sundari's superb culinary talents. I have, however, been somewhat unfortunate in that I have little feeling for music, which was such an integral part of the Seshadri household. Our mathematical contacts, however, were meager and continue to be so over the years. Nevertheless, Seshadri extended considerable encouragement to me, which contributed a great deal to my professional advancement. My friendship with Seshadri became stronger when I became his colleague on the faculty. Our views on most professional issues were similar, if not identical. But where there was disagreement, it is Seshadri's views that eventually prevailed. There were a few occasions when our professional interaction was significant. The first was in 1967, when Seshadri came up with the proof of the Mumford conjecture for SL2. I started thinking about it after I learned his proof. I came up with an alternate proof which Seshadri mentioned in his talk at the International Colloquium in January 68. I continued to make efforts at proving the conjecture for reductive groups for several months, but gave up at some point. In 1974, when I was visiting at Yale, Seshadri called me to tell me that Habush had proved the conjecture. He went on to say that Habush's method was close to mine in the case of SL2, and he was full of regret that we had not cracked the problem after getting that close. The second interaction was in 1976. Hyman Bass, who was visiting TAFR that year, gave some lectures on the quadratic Sayre conjecture, in which he had affirmative answers for certain quadratic forms in 3 and 4 variables. Parimala had given counterexamples in 4 variables. I got interested in the problem and made several false starts. Seshadri was my sounding board for many of these ideas, which did not work. Eventually, when I found a proof of an affirmative result and talked to Seshadri, he saw instantly that I was on the right track. The third occasion is much more recent. 2 years ago, I found a somewhat easier proof of the celebrated Narasimhan-Seshadri theorem and sent him my proof. His enthusiasm for my proof was transparent. He got me to give a talk about it at CMI. Apart from these interactions, we would, of course, talk a lot about mathematics and mathematicians, but not much mathematics itself. Seshadri is generally perceived as impractical, and his absent-mindedness is a source of great mirth. But I will tell you just one story illustrating that. On one occasion, Seshadri wanted to introduce my wife to a well-known musician. He started off with, "This is past," repeated it a few times, and then said, "This is one of my," fumbled again, and then said, "This is one of my wives." There are quite a few stories about his absent-mindedness, but those notwithstanding, those notwithstanding, Seshadri displayed considerable administrative skills. I saw this at close quarters when he was Dean, School of Mathematics, during an especially difficult period. He had the knack of delegating responsibilities to the right people so that he did not have to micromanage. His abilities as a man of action was manifest in the manner in which he founded CMI and developed it into a first-rate institution. Well, we are all assembled here to reminisce about Seshadri. This is all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Right. I met Seshadri for the first time in 1985, I think. I was visiting Chennai, and I was thinking seriously about coming back to India after having spent many years abroad. I dropped in on Seshadri at IMSC, where he had moved to very recently from TAFR. We hit it off from the beginning, and after going back and forth a bit, I decided to join him at IMSC and build a computer science group from scratch. Now, this was an unconventional choice at that time, but I felt very comfortable joining up with Seshadri because of his, of course, his stature and the kind of person he was. And also, I was completely assured that he wouldn't make any compromise with quality. So, starting from there, our friendship grew rapidly. And over the years, until very recently, I've spent an enormous amount of time at his home, enjoying his and Sundari's wonderful hospitality. Now, there would be a constant supply of coffee, high-class food, and of course, delightful conversations. Sundari had a sharp mind and a sharp tongue to match. And behind the facade of being a typical Iyengar mummy, she was very open-minded and quite unconventional. She was a perfect match for Seshadri, and they were a great team. Now, the point I would like to make here is it is Seshadri's personality, sustained by his home life, which played a dominant role in his building of CMI. For instance, soon after joining the Spic Science Foundation, we started to look around for getting recognition from a university for our intended teaching program. And his reputation, of course, helped open doors. But from the beginning, what took over was his personality. People took a liking to him and took seriously what he was attempting to do and tried their best to help him. Unfortunately, they couldn't because of the autonomy that we were asking for our teaching program. After a number of years, fortunately, Professor Dikshit, who was then the Vice Chancellor of Boj Open University, came into the picture. He again took a liking to Seshadri very quickly and understood what Seshadri was trying to do and managed to figure out a way for Boj Open University to award an undergraduate degree to graduates of the program we were trying to launch. And so, in the end, Seshadri managed to swing it by the sheer strength of his personality. This also came into play very often in the subsequent years when he was trying to raise money for CMI from government sources, mainly DAE through NBHM, and also significant private sources. In all these meetings, Seshadri would be completely himself, delightfully charming and friendly, but relentless in the way he presented his vision and pressed for support. Now, I think it is wonderful that by a combination of circumstances, unusual circumstances, Seshadri managed to deploy the full power of his personality for 20 odd years after turning 60, and this has resulted in the creation of this unique and high quality institution that is CMI. Now, as Seshadri would say, therefore, I've known Seshadri as my boss, my mentor, colleague, but most importantly, as an irreplaceable friend. His friendship is one of the greatest gifts I've received in my life. I shall miss him deeply.
சமானம் பாடிப்பா எங்கள் பாட்டு சாரமானவங்க பாடுவா அதனால்
When I first heard about the dizzy heights of Seshadri had scaled in the field of mathematics, I found it difficult to believe that all that genius could hide behind such a simple, unassuming personality. Of course, Seshadri never taught to me mathematics, which greatly helped our friendship. It was just music, music, and music all the way. I would say Seshadri was first a musician, then a mathematician. From his childhood, he had soaked in the rich musical traditions of his ancestral home. He had an impressive repertoire of compositions learnt either by listening to his elders at home or assiduously working on published notations. Although his approach was essentially aesthetic, his academic regimen reared its head now and then. To him, what sounded aesthetic had also to conform to grammar. If not, he would ruthlessly change the grammar. There had to be a grammar always, however chastened. He liked to draw parallels with Hindustani music and would recall phrases he had heard from the greats in that field. He was gifted with a clear, Shruti-laden voice and sang with repose. He took a deep analytical interest in differing versions of old kritis, and he always had to be clear on which one to follow and why. In the last several decades, we might have met hundreds of times. We took turns in singing ragas, kritis, particularly Neraval and Swarams, or a playful extempore pallavi, or comparing notes, or just contemplating the beauty of a phrase here or a phrase there. Even his not so infrequent bouts of poor health could not keep him from these dates, as teasingly referred to by his family members. The legendary T. Brinda had a special affection for us both and had sung to just the two of us several dozens of times in her house. The last time I met Seshadri in his life was at the hospital early this year. Poignantly so, the bare half an hour I spent by his bed was spent in singing Neraval and Swaram for one of his favorite kritis. COVID kept us apart after that, except for a brief telephone call he made just a few days before his sudden tragic end. Suave, simple, stimulating, and totally oblivious of his aura in his chosen field, he was always great company to be in. With his vivacious wife Sundari, herself a highly talented musician, they made a great loving pair. Even death could not keep them apart for long. Music is one art where one rises in an instant from mere sound frequencies to unimaginable abstract heights. Seshadri hinted now and then about similar moments experienced in music and mathematics. Perhaps if mathematics demanded deep study, music demanded total surrender. However great a mathematician Seshadri was, he will always stay in my memory as a devoted lover of music and a very, very dear friend. Thank you.
Action.
Dear distinguished guests, I am really proud to have this opportunity to speak about my Atimir, brother-in-law, who has always been a part and parcel in my life ever since he got married to my sister Sundari in the year 1962. He was such a lovely, humble, simple, great human being, which never made it difficult for any one of us to be really close to him. He was a very unique person and had no reservations while interacting with all of us on matters totally not connected with mathematics. He and my sister were very good hosts and always used to be an active participant in all our family gatherings and celebrations. In fact, it was only after his demise many of us realized how great he was and what all he had done to contribute in his line of research. This clearly indicates how humble and simple he was. He was very good in socializing with all my family members, irrespective of their age. To be precise, he was at ease to interact with my deceased mother, who recently passed away at the age of 103, as well as my grandson Dikshanya, who is just 13 years old. Ever since he got married to my sister Sundari, I used to go to Bombay when he was with TFR during my summer holidays frequently. This brought me much closer to him than many others in my family. Here I sincerely wish to say that I always felt that he was my big brother. As I travelled along right from my 13th year, this closeness and involvement in many issues, discussions kept continuing between us. Here, I would like to recall one such incident that happened in my life. I was hardly 19 years old immediately after my graduation. Due to family situation requirements, I decided to go for employment and almost joined a company in Bombay. On the very same night, he called me and we had a very serious discussion about my future. The only time we have ever spoken so seriously. He, in his own cool way, wanted me to do some higher studies and sincerely felt that I was too young to take up a job. Due to very close association with him, I just accepted the same, rushed to Chennai and joined CA course. I am really proud to say that I am a successful CA in practice ever since the year 1974. This turn of event happened in my life only due to the forethought of my Atimir. There are many such occasions where he had taken clear decision and succeeded. When it comes to me and my family, I had a great advantage as his family and my family were very well known to each other for many years, even before he got married to my sister Sundari in the year 1962. In fact, it was Seshadri's father who was instrumental for my marriage with Kumuda, who also hails from Chengalpet. My elder brothers and elder sister were known to him well even before he got married. I am 71 years old and feel from my heart that my sister Sundari and Seshadri really made a very good couple, as they hardly had any differences. The one and only thing they had in common was music. They were so happy and very much united, which set an example to all of us in the family. I will be failing in my duty if I do not speak about my lovely sister Sundari, who certainly was a big support and caretaker of Seshadri. She was extremely talented in music, theatre. She was also a very good host and used to cook well. After a point of time, she kept all her talents aside and took absolute care of my Atimir and children. This was the greatest support she gave to such a humble, open-hearted, unassuming person who could give his best contribution to mathematics. I learned so many things from him in my long association with him. One such great thing is his perseverance and confidence with which he brought out this great institute, Chennai Mathematical Institute, when he was very old. His hard, dedicated work brought out this lovely Chennai Mathematical Institute, a great institute acclaimed to be the best in India and one among the few in the world. I am sure and certain that his vision, CMI, will be taken to much greater heights with joint efforts by your dedicated team in the years to come. I thank the Institute to have given this opportunity to me, and I once again wish to state that I am really proud to have had Seshadri as my Atimir. Thank you.
Chinnanadani చెలిమికలుగా కోరిచిన నాడని చెలిమికలుగా కోరిచు పర్లేదా శ్రీరామ.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's now 45 days since Seshadri passed away. I still find it so difficult to accept that Seshadri is no more. The only consolation is that he lived a long, full and extremely successful life and brought nothing but joy and pleasure to those who knew him. Seshadri is a many-faceted personality, a very successful and very inspiring star mathematician, a very talented and self-taught Carnatic musician, a very able educator, and a very kind, compassionate and gentle person. My association with Seshadri extends over 5 decades, first as a mentor, next as my collaborator, and then as a friend. In this memorial address, I would like to touch upon the later half of my association with Seshadri. To be a little more precise, after he moved to Chennai in the mid-80s, more or less the time that I joined Northeastern University. As anybody who has something more than an acquaintance with Seshadri would have noticed, has the habit of leaving his sentences half finished, as one would expect. Same thing happened with the math discussions also. Namely, his ways of communications were rather strange and difficult to comprehend, but he always managed to get the point across to us. Especially, most of my discussion with Seshadri used to happen when we were traveling to and from Basanagar and CMI. Thus, our discussions were quite spartan, but always insightful. Every discussion had something as a takeaway, and I always used to marvel at his mathematical insight, and I became a mathematical teacher after every such discussion. Even though his character was quite simple and so much down to earth, I should say that his personality carried an aura of awesomeness, which commanded respect from the people around him. I think that this aura of awesomeness is responsible for his accomplishment of building single-handedly such as research institution as CMI, in spite of some initial period of financial difficulties. Thanks to the relentless efforts of Seshadri, today CMI has evolved internationally as one of the most well-recognized Indian institutions for mathematics. Let me now turn to the more lighter side of Seshadri. Seshadri had a very naive sense of humor. His wife Sundari, on the other hand, was quite sharp-witted. They both complimented each other. As the saying goes, behind every man's success there is a woman. In Seshadri's case, Sundari was undoubtedly that woman. Having known Seshadri for 5 decades, I would describe him as a very gentle person, patient to the core. Of all the good traits about him, I like his patience the most. I could say just by observing him, I have learned so many things about life, and the trait in him that cannot be missed by anyone who knows him is his own modesty. We all know that he received many prestigious awards throughout his career. In spite of being the recipient of so many glorious awards, he remained so modest that the state of his modesty only added to his personality. I would like to end this memory letters by quoting Seshadri's general philosophy on life. Nothing is the end of the world. Thank you all for your patience.
My first visit to TAFR was in 1973, and I'm sure I met Professor Seshadri there. I met him again in Chennai when he joined the Institute of Mathematical Sciences in 1984. Professor Sudarshan was the director of the institute, and he was splitting his time between Austin, Texas and Chennai. Seshadri was the head of the mathematics side for about 5 years. I was a frequent visitor to Chennai and visited IMS and met Seshadri often. Around 1989, split the Southern Petroleum Industries Corporation, through its foundation, started a School of Mathematics with Seshadri as its director. It started in a small way, located in a couple of floors of an office building. It was the effort of Mr. Muthaiya, chairman of SPIC, who I remember attending a grand reception at Mr. Muthaiya's residence in connection with Professor Seshadri's 60th birthday conference, 1992 maybe. Over a period of time, the institute has grown in size, changed its structure, and eventually became the Chennai Mathematics Institute. Seshadri has devoted 30 years of his life working for CMI, his retirement notwithstanding. Raising funds to maintain the institute was a problem he tried to solve. Government support was spotty, and even when it came, it was not in time. Private foundations as well as individuals helped and the institute grew. Seshadri always insisted that teaching be a vital part of the institute's mission. It has successfully run a master's and bachelor's degree program in mathematics and computer science. Many of the students have gone abroad to excellent institutions to obtain advanced degrees. I have a successful working relationship with all of the graduates. Although most of my visits to Chennai have been short, I did spend a long period a couple of times and gave a course of lectures at CMI. I'm also a recipient of an honorary degree from CMI. Over the years, Professor Seshadri and we have had many discussions about CMI, its goals, problems, and accomplishments. I've always enjoyed my visits. His health has not been good the last few years. I visited him last on January 9th this year. It's been a difficult time for him after losing Sundari. He invited me to have lunch at his home. And we went to CMI after lunch, and I dropped him off in Besant Nagar at his home on the way back to my hotel. That was the last time I saw him. We will all miss him.
Since many eminent mathematicians are speaking on Seshadri's mathematical achievements today, I will touch upon those things only briefly, concentrating more on my personal and familial contacts with him. Well, I joined the Tata Institute as a graduate student in August 1957. I met Seshadri only a couple of times at that time before he left for a 3-year stint in Paris. He was about 4 years my senior. But during his stay in Paris, when we heard that he had made contributions to Sayre's conjecture on modules over polynomial rings and to the construction of Picard varieties on non-normal varieties, we were thrilled. And this way, we got some confidence that we can think of problems which are interesting internationally and contemporarily, instead of just tinkering here and there. Referring to his mode of thinking, for example, one of my colleagues, he had done at the time something on, as I said, some progress on Sayre's conjecture and later on the Mumford conjecture. One of my colleagues, C.P. Ramanujan, remarked once to me, when Seshadri takes up a problem, he reduces it to nuts and bolts, solves it, and reassembles. Seshadri's was indeed a bottoms-up approach. In fact, he used the word akkavera aanuvera in Tamil. Soon after his return to India, Seshadri ran a seminar on algebraic groups, which I enjoyed tremendously. And I also learned a lot from that seminar. Before that, Kosul had visited us, and I was into differential geometry, motivated by him. The famous work of Narasimhan and Seshadri on vector bundles on algebraic curves, interconnected differential geometry and algebraic geometry. And so I transferred some of their ideas to the domain of homogeneous vector bundles in my thesis. Although Seshadri and I had similar interests, we never collaborated formally. Occasionally, he would discuss with me some problems his students were working on, and I would help a little. Once, he left abroad for a year, and he asked me to be a substitute mentor of Lakshmi Bai, one of his bright students at the time, later to become a professor at Northeastern University. His family and mine were close. He would visit us once in a while to have a session of music. Once he told me, somehow, whenever I sing at your place, I seem to be at my best. That, of course, made me very happy. His wife, Sundari, was an accomplished musician as well. She was also interested, in addition, in the performing arts. And once, she induced my daughter, Kavita, to act in a Tamil play. The next day, the review of the play appeared in the Indian Express with the heading, Little Kavita Impresses. And Sundari was even more delighted than we were. After 30 years of working in TIFR, Seshadri left for Chennai due to personal reasons. This was a lucky circumstance in a way, since it helped spread higher mathematics more widely in India. He was initially at the Institute of Mathematical Sciences in Chennai, but soon started the Chennai Mathematical Institute, which would engage in teaching undergraduates as well, besides doing research. In this effort, his knack of selecting appropriate persons and entrusting them with administrative responsibility was crucial. When most bright students from CMI were leaving abroad after their graduation, and some of us were feeling a little despondent, he remarked, in the prevailing situation, this is only to be expected. But this also makes our institute attractive to aspiring students. The only way to get bright students to stay back in India is to increase the number of students who shine, so that at least some percentage will remain or will come back after getting their doctorate. While Seshadri was aware of his stature in the mathematical world, he was still quite humble. I will give you one small incident. Once, when he was nearly 80 at the time, he called me late one evening and asked me a question on algebraic groups and said, I am so confused on this question that I cannot even sleep. Fortunately, I understood the problem and simply told him the centralizer of a semi-simple element can sometimes be even semi-simple, not only reductive. This has to do with the coefficients of the highest root when it is written in terms of simple roots. He was so relieved that I felt that I had done something to help him get some rest. Seshadri was multifaceted. I have already remarked about his musical prowess. He was in close contact with the top mathematicians as well as bigwigs in Chennai musical circles, such as Spencer Venugopal, Cleveland Sundaram, R. Tyagarajan, etc. I treasure his invitations to me during their visits to his house. He also liked modern art, particularly Impressionism. Several years ago, he gifted me a book entitled Mainstreams of Modern Art, which I refer to from time to time even these days. His family was close to David Mumford's. David and his wife Erika had 3 children, all boys. They wished to adopt an Indian daughter, and the Seshadris helped to facilitate this process in numerous ways. I should add here that Seshadris themselves chose an orphan to help them domestically, who has in course of time become almost a member of the family. I am lucky to have had his friendship for over 60 years, both personally and professionally. May his soul rest in peace.
Most of you are aware, the highly distinguished mathematician, Professor C.S. Seshadri, passed away a little more than a month ago. I had known Professor Seshadri for about half a century. I saw him first in 1972 when I joined TIFR as a student. Initially, I hardly had an occasion to interact with him. I was studying analytic number theory under Professor Ramchandra. And therefore, I was pleasantly surprised when, around the end of 1984, a little after Seshadri moved to IMSC to set up the mathematics group here, he asked me if I could consider shifting to IMSC, which I did. For the ensuing 5 years, till 1989, I was fortunate to see Seshadri from close quarters, and I learned to admire his personality, administrative acumen, and the vision for the institution. It was under his leadership that the mathematics group began to flourish at IMSC. He also had an idea of initiating a group in the area of theoretical computer science. This was at a time when the research in this subject was carried in a very few places in India. In 1989, Professor Seshadri decided to create a mathematics and theoretical computer science group under the umbrella of Speak Science Foundation. This, of course, later became the Chennai Mathematical Institute. Professor Seshadri was very pleased to see that the CMI acquired a great name in both research and in teaching in mathematics. When much later, around 2000, I became the director of IMSC, Professor Seshadri was a member of the governing council of IMSC, and I always sought his advice on a wide variety of administrative matters. For the guidance and his friendship over all this time, I shall miss him greatly. Thank you.
எல்லோருக்கும் நமஸ்காரம். என் பேர் ராமநாதன். I am son of mathematician, the musician. I would like to share some of my interactions with Dr. Seshadri. My relationship or friendship with Dr. Seshadri goes back to 55 years. எனக்கு ஒரு 15 வயசு இருக்கும். அப்போ ருத்தா ராஜன் அவர்கள், டாக்டர் ருத்தா ராஜன் அவர்கள் பாட்டு சொல்லிக்க வந்தா. ருத்தா ராஜன்ஸ் ஃபாதர் அண்ட் டாக்டர் சேஷாத்ரிஸ் ஃபாதர் ஹேப்பன்ஸ் டு பி ஓன் பிரதர்ஸ். அந்த கான்டெக்ட்ஸில் ஒரு நாளைக்கு ஆற்றுக்கு வந்திருந்தார் அவர். ஆனால் அதுக்கு முன்னாடியே அவருக்கு அப்பாவுக்கு பெரிய ஆர்டர் அண்ட் ஃபேன். பாம்பேயில் அப்பா நிறைய கச்சேரி அட்டன் பண்ணியிருக்கார். பட் ஐ ஹேட் த ப்ளஷர் ஆஃப் மீட்டிங் ஒன்லி தென். அதுக்கப்புறம் ஒரு 5-6 வருஷத்தில் மை ஃபாதர் பாஸ்ட் அவே அண்ட் ப்ராப்ளி சேஷாத்ரி சார் வாஸ் இன் பாம்பே. அதுக்கப்புறம் அவர் மெட்ராஸ் வந்தபோது அந்த ஃப்ரெண்ட்ஷிப் கண்டினியூ ஆனது. அதை பற்றி ஐ லைக் டு ஷேர் அ ஃபியூ திங்ஸ் வித் ஆல் ஆஃப் யூ. என்னோட இம்ப்ரெஷன் அபவுட் டாக்டர் சேஷாத்ரி இஸ் லைக் எ ஹெமிஸ்பியர். ஒன் ஹாஃப் ஆஃப் இட் இஸ் mathematics, the other half is music, and as you rightly judged, I'm not going to touch the first half of mathematics, but the other one about music is what I like to share something with you. முதல்ல ஒரு பரம ரசிகர். எனக்கு அவரோட நிறைய உட்காந்து பாட்டு கேட்குற வாய்ப்புகள் கிடைச்சிது. வாரம் ஸ்பென்சர் வேணுகோபால் இடத்துல சனிக்கிழமை வீல் மீட், எல்லோரும் உட்காந்து பாடுவா. அந்த கேட்குற வாய்ப்பு எனக்கு கிடைச்சிருக்கு. ரித்தாராஜனோட ஹஸ்பண்ட் ராஜன், அப்புறம் நீலகண்டன் திருவாலங்காடு சுந்தரேஸ்வரோட சன், நிறைய ரசிகர் அவர். நாங்கள் எல்லாம் போவோம், நிறைய பாடுவார். சேஷாதிரி சாரும் ஃபஸ்ட் கிளாஸாக பாடுவார். இந்த ஆகீர் பைரவி, அப்புறம் தர்பாரி காண்டா, அந்த மாதிரி பியூர் ஹிந்துஸ்தானி ராகங்களையும் எடுத்துன்னு பாடுவார். வெறும் ஒரு சுதிப்பட்டி வச்சுட்டு அவ்வளவுதான். அதுக்கப்புறம் ஒரு வராளி ஒரு வாட்டி பாடியிருக்கார். ஐ கேன் ஸ்டில் ரீகால் தட் வராளி. இந்த மாதிரி ஒரு மகா பெரிய ரசிகன். ரெகுலராக we used to meet in such a wonderful man, as we all know. When I celebrated my father's centenary year between 2017 and 2018, கிட்டத்தட்ட ஒரு 24 கச்சேரி வச்சுட்டு இருந்தேன். அதில் ஒரு more than 20 he was able to make it. ஆற்றில் ஏதாவது சேம்பர் கான்சர்ட் கூட வந்துடுவார். இதெல்லாம் just to show that how close I am with him, which is my pleasure and pride. இப்போ அவரோட மியூசிக் சம்மந்தமாக 2 விஷயத்தை நிச்சயமாக உங்களோட நான் ஷேர் பண்ண ஆசைப்பட்றேன். ஒன்று, ஒரு பர்டிகுலர் காலகட்டத்தில் ஒரு 2 வருஷம் நினைக்கிறேன், வாரத்துக்கு ஒரு நாள் பிருந்தாம்மா வெறும் தம்புரா போட்டுட்டா வாரத்தில் பாடுவா. நான், சேஷாதிரி சார், வேணுகோபால் சார், நாங்கள் எல்லோரும் போவோம். அன்றைக்கி ஒரு பாட்டை பாடினா அந்த பிருந்தாம்மா. அது முடித்த உடனே ஐ திங்க் வேகா தான் நினைக்கிறேன், டாக்டர் வேகாவை கூப்பிட்டு அந்த சங்கீத சம்பிரதாய பிரதர்ஷினி புக்கு கொண்டு வா, ஐ திங்க் அந்த புக் தான் நினைக்கிறேன், எஸ் அதை கொண்டு வா அப்படின்னு கேட்டால், இப்படிக்கு பார்த்துன்னே இருந்தோம் நாங்கள். என்ன அது இப்படி ஒரு பக்கத்தை திறந்துட்டு ஒரு பக்கத்தை நிறுத்தி வச்சுட்டு, சேஷாதிரி சார் இங்கே பாருங்கோ, இந்த புஸ்தகத்தில் இப்படி தான் போட்டிருக்கு, ஆனால் எங்களுக்கு இப்படி தான் அது பாடாந்துரும் அப்படின்னா அசந்து போயிட்டோம். அப்புறம் தான் என்ன ஆயிருக்குன்னா, இந்தம்மா பாடுறச்சே அந்த டீவியேஷன் அவர் எங்கேயோ ஒரு மூஞ்சியில் காட்டியிருக்கார். அந்தம்மா ஷூட் அதை கண்டுபிடிச்சிட்டு அதை சொன்னார். சேஷாதிரி சாருக்கு அவ்வளோ சந்தோஷம். See, coming from that kind of a lady, that kind of a comment, அது இதை விட ஒரு அவருடைய சங்கீத நாலேஜ் டெப்த்துக்கு வேறு சர்டிஃபிகேட்டே வேண்டாங்கிறது தான் என்னோடய ஃபீலிங். வெளியில் சொல்லியிருந்தார், அம்மா எல்லாம் தெரிஞ்சிருக்கிறதுமா நல்லா பாடுறாங்க, பட் விஷயமும் நல்லா தெரிஞ்சிருக்குல்ல அப்படின்னு அவர் செயலில் அவர் கேட்டுன்னு வந்தார். இது ஒரு ஆஸ்பெக்ட் ரொம்ப ரொம்ப முக்கியமாக. ஐ கேன் நெவர் ஃபர்கெட் தட். இன்னொன்று, அபவுட் மை ஃபாதர், மியூசிஷியன் ரமநாட்கிருஷ்ணன் பற்றி நான் ஒரு டாக்குமெண்ட் பண்ணினேன். அது முடிஞ்சு ஒரு 2 வருஷம் கழிச்சு ஐ வாண்டட் டு டாக்குமெண்ட் பிருந்தாம்மா, விச் ஐ டிட். மியூசிக் பியாண்ட் மியூசிக்ன்ற பேரில் என்னுடைய ஆத்ம நண்பன் ஸ்ரீ காந்தன், பிரம்மஸ்ரீ பாலகிருஷ்ண சாஸ்திரி அவருடைய பையன், அவன் தான் முதல் டிவிடியும் டைரக்ட் பண்ணான். ஈ வாஸ் தேர், வி டுக் இட் அஸ் அ ப்ராஜெக்ட். ஸோ இதை பிருந்தாம்மாவை டாக்குமெண்ட் பண்ணணும் அப்படின்னு முடிவு பண்ணவுடனே ஃபஸ்ட்டு மீட்டிங்காக நான், சார் வேணுகோபால், மை ஃப்ரெண்ட் காந்தன், அண்ட் அஃப்கோர்ஸ் டாக்டர் சேஷாத்ரி, வி மெட் இன் வேணுகோபால்ஸ் ஹவுஸ். அது ஏதோ கொஞ்ச நேரம் அவர் பாட்டை பற்றிலாம் பேசியிருந்தா, மை ஃப்ரெண்டும் காந்தனும் அவளை அப்படியே ரெக்கார்ட் பண்ணிட்டு இருந்தான். ஒரு இன்சிடென்ட் நான் சொல்லணும், வேணும் உங்களுக்கு ஞாபகம் இருக்கா அப்படின்னு அவர் ஆரம்பித்தார். அப்புறம் என்னையும் காந்தனையும் பார்த்து ஒரு நேரேட் பண்ணினார் ஒன்று. அந்த விஷயத்தை ஐ வாண்ட் டு நேரேட் டு யூ ஆல். திட்டைன்னு ஒரு ஊர் இருக்குது. இது கும்போணத்துலேருந்து தஞ்சாவூர் போகிற ரோட்டில், மெயின் ரோட்லேருந்து ஒரு 2 கிலோமீட்டர் லெஃப்டில் உள்ளே போனால் வர ஒரு டெம்பிள். அது ஒரு நல்ல ஃபேமஸ் குருஸ்தலம். நானே நிறைய வாட்டி அதுக்கப்புறம் போயிருக்கேன். அங்கே ஒரு ஃபெஸ்டிவல் temple festival in a village, you can imagine. அதில் பிருந்தாம்மா பாட்டு வேணுகோபால் சாரும் சேஷாத்ரி அதுக்கு போயிருக்கான். இல்லை என்னன்னா முதல்ல ஒரு 5:30 மணிக்கு 6 மணிக்கு ஒரு நாதஸ்வரம், அப்புறம் யாரோ 2 பேர் பாட்டு, அந்த டிப்பிக்கல் ஒரு உற்சவத்தில் உண்டான ஒரு நாய்ஸ் அதெல்லாம் போயிட்டு இருக்கு. சேஷாத்ரி சொல்கிறார் வேணுகோபாலை பார்த்து, வேணுகோபால் சார் யூ ரிமெம்பர், நமக்கு கொஞ்சம் பயமாக வந்தது, இந்த அம்மா பாட போகிறாளே, சன்னமான வாய்ஸ் என்ன ஆக போகிறதுன்னு கேட்டுன்னு ராம்நாதன். அந்த அம்மா உட்காந்தா மேடையில், எம்மனும் தம்பரா சுத்தம் வந்தது, எந்நேரமும் உந்தன் அப்படின்னு ஆரம்பித்தா இந்த எல்லா சப்தமும் அடங்கி போயிடுது. அதுதான் த பவர் ஆஃப் தட் மியூசிக். இட் வாஸ் ஆல் வி கனாட் ஈவன் பிலீவ் அப்படின்னு சாட்சிக்கு வேறு வேணுகோபால் சாரையும் கூப்பிட்டுட்டார். இப்போ பார்த்தேன்னா உடனே அது முடித்த உடனே என் ஃப்ரெண்டு காந்தன் சொல்லிட்டான், ராம்நாத், ஐவ் காட் த ஃபர்ஸ்ட் ஷாட் ஃபார் பிருந்தாமாஸ் டிவிடின்னு. இஃப் யூ லுக் அட் த டிவிடி, இட் ஸ்டார்ட்ஸ் வித் எந்நேரமும் முந்தன் அட் திட்டை கோவில். அந்தளவுக்கு அவருக்கு ஒரு ரொம்ப பிரமாதமான டெப்த் இன் மியூசிக். என் ஃப்ரெண்ட்ஸ் எல்லாம் சில பேர் டாக்டர் சேஷாத்ரியை பார்க்கணுன்னு சொல்லுவாள், பார்த்துருக்க மாட்டா. அவகிட்ட நான் இதான் சொல்லுவேன், அவரோட ப்ரொஃபைல் சொல்லி அவரோட அச்சீவ்மெண்ட் சொல்லி அதெல்லாம் சொல்லிவிட்டு கடைசியில் நான் சொல்லுவேன், ஒரு 5-6 பேர் இருந்தால் இதை வண்டி வச்சுட்டு உங்களால் சேஷாத்ரியை கண்டுபிடிக்க முடியாதுன்னு சொல்லுவேன். அதான் உண்மை. இதை விட எனக்கு அவருடைய சிம்பிளிசிட்டியை பற்றி எக்ஸ்பிளைன் பண்ணவே முடியல. அது பல பேரையும் ரொம்ப ரசிக்க வச்ச ஒரு கேரக்டர். சிம்பிளிசிட்டிங்கிறது நிஜமாகவே எப்படிங்கன்னு ஒரு வாழ்ந்து காட்டின ஒரு மகா மேதை அவர். அவரோட இருந்தது, அவரோட பழகினது, இதுவே ஒரு பெரிய பாக்கியம். ஐம் அ வெரி கிஃப்டட் பர்சன், தட் ஐம் வெரி வெரி ஹாப்பி. அவருடைய பர்சனல் லைஃப் அதுலேயும் அவர் ஒரு ஹெமிஸ்பியர் தான். ஒரு ஹாஃப் டாக்டர் சேஷாத்ரின்னா என்னால் சொல்லாமல் இருக்க முடியாது. த அதர் ஹாஃப் இஸ் சுந்தரி மேடம். ஆஹா, என்ன ஒரு பர்சனாலிட்டி, என்ன ஒரு ஒய்ஃப், என்ன ஒரு நாலேஜ் இன் மியூசிக், என்ன ஒரு ருச்சி. அம்மாவும் ரொம்ப அழகாக பாடுவாள். கொஞ்ச நாள் முன்னாடி தான் பாடுறதை விட்டுட்டா, ஆனால் அதுக்கு முன்னாடி நான் பாடி கேட்டிருக்கேன். ரொம்ப அழகாக பாடுவாள். அவள் 2 பேருக்கும் இன்னும் மேட் ஃபார் ஈச் அதர்னு சும்மா சொல்கிறா. அது ரொம்ப டிப்பிக்கலாக மேட் ஃபார் ஈச் அதர்னு நான் அனுபவித்த ஒரு கேரக்டர் சொல்லணுன்னாக்கா சேஷாத்ரி சுந்தரி கப்பல் அவள் தான். அதே மாதிரி அந்த அம்மாவோட பரந்த மனசையும் அந்த இடத்துல டெஃபினட்டாக நான் சொல்லணும். ஒரு மார்ச் மாதம் வச்சுக்கோங்களேன், ஒரு ஜஸ்ட் பிகினிங் ஆஃப் த சீசன் ஒரு வாட்டியாக அதுக்கு போயிருந்தேன். ஒரு டக்குன்னு கட் பண்ணி மாம்பழம் கொண்டு வச்சா, நல்லா இருந்தது. பார்த்தா எப்படி இருக்குன்னா, சூப்பராக இருக்குது அப்படின்னா, எடுத்துக்கோ அப்படின்னா, சரி இன்னும் ஒரு 10 நிமிஷம் பேசிக்கிட்டு அதோ கிளம்பினேன். ஒரு பையில் ஒரு 10 மாம்பழம் போட்டு கொடுத்து அனுப்பிச்சுட்டா. இதெல்லாம் ஸ்பீக்ஸ் அ லாட் அபவுட் த கேரக்டர்ஸ். அவளால் ஒரு இணை பெரிய முடியாத ஒரு கப்புலவா பாவம். அதனால தான் இந்த பிரிவும் ஜாஸ்தி தாங்க முடியாமல் அவள் 2 பேருமே மேலே இப்போ எங்கேயோ ஒரு இடத்துல சுவாமிகிட்ட பாடிட்டு சந்தோஷமாக இருந்து நம்மளையும் வாழ்த்தின்னு இருப்பான்னு ஃபீல் பண்ணுறேன். Again, let me repeat, it's once in a lifetime chance somebody gets an occasion to be a friend of Dr. Seshadri. I am truly blessed. Thank you. Good day.
I feel so privileged to say a few words about my dear cousin, the great mathematician, Professor C.S. Seshadri. It is really fascinating to ponder over Professor Seshadri's multifacets, which in fact make a very interesting and astonishing combination. Seshadri was a very affectionate, soft, simple, and a very low-profile person. Everyone in the family was so fond of him, as he would mix with all of us very naturally and very spontaneously. Sometimes, when we so enthusiastically or unknowingly or even unwittingly asked him about his great contributions, he would explain to us so patiently and so unassumingly what he had done in the field of mathematics. Seshadri was so passionate about pure classical music, and as a musician myself, I have been wonderstruck by Seshadri's deep involvement with music and his in-depth knowledge of the highly evolved traditions of Carnatic music, Hindustani music, and Western music also. And he was a Carnatic musician in his own right. He would so competently discuss the various technical aspects of any music system, and more than that, he would offer his very shrewd and pertinent observations, which were real eye-openers. Seshadri was so proud and passionate of the musical legacy of our families, and also at the same time, so surprisingly and admiringly, he was also dispassionate and he would discuss and analyze with an open mind the plus and minus points of the music that we sang in the family. So that was a true research mind that had an unquenchable thirst to search for truth and to search for true knowledge. I always feel Seshadri's presence while studying or analyzing any worthy music material. Thank you.
One and all, I'm Vasan, Seshadri's brother. The age difference between us is 25 years. He was more like my father than brother. It is my man ki baat. The king is no more. Long live CMI. Every time we met and discussed history, politics, without visa and travel documents, he forayed into the past, into various regions, stood before the forgotten empires and civilizations, transformed ourselves as Egyptians, Mayans, and Incans. We talked about Greek mythology, Tamil folk theatre, and compared it with the Japanese. Discussed about culinary cultures of various people and societies. We discussed without pen, paper, and official seal. We sorted out various international issues like Palestine and Afghanistan. We decided the electoral outcomes based on probability theories. The past and the future was very much present during our discussions. He never abdicated his responsibilities as the eldest. He is a good listener, companion, very tolerant, and a motivator. On 17th July evening, I met him and as usual discussed about our favorite topics. He laughed for my prophecies and held my hand for a long time. I am fortunate and feel blessed.
Modern, they don't want to read.
And they read
நாங்கெல்லாம் old fashioned. பிடிக்கால் போகுது Tak,